Welcome back to the MovieBabble podcast, one of America's only podcasts not owned by the Walt Disney Company. This week, I'm joined by Nick and Brennan as we break down this weekend's top 5, as well as the debut of Dumbo and Unplanned. Alright, so breaking down this week's top 5, we've got Dumbo in the number 1 spot with 45 million, followed by Us. Had a fairly steep drop-off, but it's still at 33.6 million in the number 2 spot. Captain Marvel's still in the top 5 at number 3 with 20.5 million. And then that's followed by 5 Feet Apart at 6.25 million, and Unplanned debuting shortly behind 5 Feet Apart with 6.1 million. So I saw Dumbo. I don't know if you guys saw either that or Unplanned at all.
Yeah, I saw Dumbo, yeah. Yep.
Okay.
I didn't see anything. I had one movie this week to see because it's just life, and I saw The Beach Bum, and we'll get to that in a few. But yeah, these two are ones I need to catch up on.
So Brennan, if you want to go on Dumbo, and then I have a lot to say about Dumbo, so I'll come in after you.
Yeah, for sure. I'll come from the numbers side of things. I mean, the budget is rather high for this film. I'm sure that the marketing, especially with it being a Disney live-action film, it's a big, major release for them. They marketed this thing pretty heavily. $45 million domestically. The projections were around that, so they hit the projections. Globally, this thing underperformed slightly. I think it's coming around 116 million for a worldwide opening weekend. That's including domestic numbers and overseas numbers. And I'm seeing that numbers for the budget are sitting around $170 million. So this is not, I wouldn't say this is the strongest start, but it is a Disney film. I'm sure it'll have respectable legs. I'm sure it'll break even. And it's also supposed to be one of the very first things they throw on the Disney streaming service when that takes off. So, you know what, it's a fine opening. Probably not the wow numbers that they would have hoped for, but it's a fine opening.
Yeah, I would agree. And, you know, I liked the film, or at least parts of the film. It's not one that I'm just too crazy about, but it's an interesting movie. So we talked about it a little bit earlier, but this movie is basically the original Dumbo, which is only like an hour and 4 or 5 minutes. And so the first probably 45 minutes of this movie are just Tim Burton putting his own spin on the original movie. And then it's just a completely different movie. And I feel like it's really bogged down in the fact that it is a remake. So Tim Burton is kind of stuck to the source material, and he's not able to really tell the story he wants to tell until he jumps through all those hurdles.
Right.
So I don't know what your thoughts on the film quality-wise were.
You know what? There are parts that I liked, parts that I didn't. I was really excited for this film because I thought that they hit it spot on in the trailers. I think that the trailers looked phenomenal. But you know, that's kind of the way things are sometimes. Trailers can be better than the movie. But I was somewhat underwhelmed. I think there are aspects of the film I enjoyed for sure. But it's an okay movie. I probably won't have an urge to ever watch it again. But it's a good one-time watch. I respect that he put a lot more content into this film. It's not like your average remake. It kind of feels a bit more like a sequel, in my opinion, without kind of giving too much away. But just it felt corny to me. I didn't love the film completely. The aesthetic of the movie's great. It looks great. The visuals are great. But story-wise, I thought the film was a little bit weak. Dialogue-wise, I mean, the characters weren't that fleshed out. The only real character I rooted for was the baby elephant Dumbo. So I mean, that's that.
So
Yeah.
a question I have for both of you guys, because when I looked at the trailer for this, I was like, oh, this looks like a more modest like Disney movie, and then I saw that budget number that Brennan mentioned before. It's $170 million, which I think is just absurdly high. I think Captain Marvel was like $152 million budget.
Yep, yeah, that's right.
So I asked you guys, because you guys see the movie, like, did this movie look like it costed $170 million? Like, did all that get on screen, or what? Because I don't know what I'm missing here. Like, that's a crazy budget for this movie.
You know what? There are a lot of CGI'd elephants in this film, and they look like there was not one point, in my opinion, that they looked fake. I think that it looked truly like authentic elephants on screen, so they did a really good job with that. And then there are times, yeah, when it looks like there's some pricey budgets on some of the scenes that were playing, but 170 seems like somewhat of a high number. I don't know. I still would expect this film to be at the very least $100 million. There are some pretty expensive looking sequences, but I don't know. It's a high number. I don't know if it's a risky number for a film like this, because it's not Lion King status or Aladdin status for Disney animated movies getting remade. Like, it's not to that pedigree, in my opinion. Like, not that level of popularity. But you know what? It looked expensive at times. But yeah, 170 it's a little bit high. But it's tough. It's a tough thing to look at.
Yeah, and I think it's kind of interesting. So if you look into like the original Dumbo, so out of the first films from Snow White through Cinderella, the only two that made a profit were Snow White and Dumbo until Cinderella. And so when Dumbo was made, Walt Disney, they had put out Fantasia and Pinocchio, which I think are two of their best movies, but they were flops. And so Dumbo was made with as low a budget as possible, just because they needed to save money. So like if you go back and you watch the original movie, you see a lot of frames where all the background characters aren't colored in. They do like a lot more with silhouettes. The movie itself is barely over an hour. Mm-hmm. And so it's such a modest thing to try to adapt with such a big budget. And I was kind of surprised that they chose this to adapt, because in general, like the Walt Disney Company has never put much stock in Dumbo. Like, it made a fair amount of money just because it didn't cost much money to make. But it's this and Alice in Wonderland have never gone in the Disney vault, which is like how they select which movies Disney is, confident in and really enjoys. So like Dumbo's always been available, but he's never been just hugely popular as a film. And I also think Tim Burton is just an odd choice to direct it. So if you look at a lot of the older Disney movies, Dumbo is really the only one that's pretty much completely lighthearted. And it's just a really happy, pleasant movie. and so I think I like what Tim Burton did with it, what he could, but I think it's just an odd movie to try and reboot with that director with such a large budget. And especially other than the elephants, there isn't anything really ornate or elaborate that I see that really demanded that much money in the movie.
Yeah, I'm gonna be honest. This movie seems like, just with that budget, it seems like a bit of a miscalculation. I mean, because you guys mentioned before, it's gonna make its movie, and Brennan it's gonna make its money, and Brennan make a really good point earlier about it's probably gonna headline Disney Plus when that drops, and it's nice to have as much big just content on there as possible to market it right off the bat. But like I would never have thought that this movie would make like a 500 million number worldwide. Like, that just never seemed like a possibility to me for Dumbo. And like, it's kind of, and like if you go by like just like general ledgers for like how much money a movie needs to make based on like $170 million budget, like right around like 500 million is like a kind of a standard like amount. So like, it's just weird. I don't get that. I mean, I'm sure it's gonna be fine. Disney is not hurting for money. They just bought Fox. They own everything. So like, this movie is not gonna like hurt anything. But it just feels like I wonder if there's something we're missing here, where they paid all the actors up front, so no one has points on the movie. So they literally just have all their costs rolled up front, and anything they get is just like going back into their pockets. But it just seems weird. It just seems weird to me. Yeah, go ahead.
It's interesting with it having so large a budget, because one thing that I kind of noticed watching the movie is it just feels really stretched too thin. Like, you can see there's a lot there, but none of it really has any substance to it. And so even like I just don't understand this movie, really, I guess is what I'm trying to say. But
yeah, it's a big cast too. Like, yeah, even like Michael Keaton, Danny DeVito, Eva Green. Like, there's so many people. Colin Farrell. It's just, there's so many people in this movie. Yeah.
And there's a pretty wide display of the elephants, but even then there are really only a few scenes where Dumbo flies, which I would understand would take up quite a bit of budget trying to animate that. But I just don't know where this larger number is justified or kind of what hopes they got from it. And yeah, it's a weird kind of start to their blockbuster season because from Dumbo we have a few more weeks until Endgame. Aladdin comes out, Toy Story, and Dumbo is kind of the lead into that, and it's not a very strong lead in, so I'm a little confused as to why they decided to release this one first as well.
Yeah, I think it's just one of those things where Dumbo isn't the biggest name, so they figure let's just put
Yeah,
this in before like the sort of summer rush starts to come in, which I think is pretty smart. But I mean, you mentioned it there with Endgame. Like that movie is like easily, unless it's like reviled by everybody, like it's gonna make 2 billion. So like
Yeah.
yeah,
it's not like this isn't like an issue. Like I don't want to paint this out like this is like a monumental disaster for Disney, but it's just curious. I don't quite understand it.
I think the point you make about paying all the actors up front, no points on the end, I think that's probably what happened here. I think that's probably the right assumption.
Yeah, it's just a really big cast. Like this is a really
yeah.
like it's one of those movies with a deep bench. Like there's just like name actors popping up all over the place, and it's like, oh, I know that person, and I have a history with them. So I don't know. We'll see. Weird one.
Such a large cast, and yet they cut my favorite character from the original. I
Oh
won't
yeah,
forgive them
man.
for that. They cut the
Yeah,
mouse. That was criminal.
yeah. He gets a little cameo, but like that, not
Which
not really much.
Yeah, there are clear decisions they made to distance this one from the original a little bit. Like, I don't know how well you guys remember the original, but there is a scene towards the end where Dumbo and Timothy the Mouse get drunk, and then Dumbo they like wake up in a tree, and they find these crows that are basically racist caricatures, and so they kind of trimmed most of that from the movie to make it more kid friendly. But then they
Yeah, I
also
think
That was probably
they.
smart.
Yeah,
they also added so much, and there's a quote from Walt Disney about the original movie. So when they first made it, they were still working with RKO to produce and distribute everything. And because of the runtime, they're like, we either want you to cut this down to like half an hour and make it a short, or add 30 more minutes worth of stuff so it's a full feature length. And Walt Disney's quoted as saying, you can only stretch a thing so much and then it won't hold. And I feel like they completely ignored that and were like, all right, we're going to stretch Dumbo out to 2 hours. And it just kind of is too thin and falls apart for me.
yeah. I mean, I think from they did modernize the film in a good way, without giving away too many spoilers. Kind of about perceptions on the circus and how kind of we look at that today as opposed to back in the 1940s. They really modernized that, I think, in an appropriate way. So it's a fine film, yeah, but it's nothing like the original, and it's not revolutionary.
Yeah, I definitely agree. So, unless we have anything else to add on Dumbo, we can circle back around to us. And I know Brennan and I talked about that quite a bit last week. Have
Hmm.
you had a chance to see it yet, Nick?
I did. I saw it last week. My review's up for it on the site. I quite liked it, even if I do have some issues with it. But I'm glad to see that. I mean, it's a 52.7% drop, which would look a little steep to other people, but horror movies tend to drop a lot quicker than other movies because they play to the audience. Their audience goes and sees it. It's typically not a genre you go rush back to the theater to see multiple times. So that combined with the fact that Us just opened ridiculously high last week, as you guys talked about last week, like a half drop is actually really good for this movie. And it shows that a lot of people liked it, and I think that goes back to this isn't quite though just your typical horror movie. Like there's things to parse here, like parse through here, and definitely repeat viewings are important to kind of wrapping your head around it. So yeah, this movie is doing really, really well. $20 million budget, almost 175 million worldwide. Like Jordan, this is just more on top of just Jordan Peele. Is just going to be able to make whatever great movie he wants for a long time. So yeah, it's
Yeah, for
doing
sure.
really, really well.
Yeah, I think also one thing to point out is it did just open up in all its foreign markets this weekend too. Last week was, I believe, just a a domestic opening and I think a couple smaller foreign markets. But this week it got into pretty much every major foreign market. So we're going to start to see a little bit more money pour in. I mean, I know Get Out wasn't as big overseas. I think I touched on that last weekend as it was in North America. But us should, just because of how popular Get Out was, us should do a little bit better than Get Out did overseas. The money will look great. They're making back a ton of money on this film for sure. And as you said, yeah, Jordan Peele's going to have a lot of reigns in the future for sure.
Yeah, I would agree. I'm excited to see what he does with The Twilight Zone. I think that actually premieres either this week or next week. But yeah, he's got free reign of whatever he wants to do next.
Yeah, and
I'm excited to see him go further with it.
Yeah, and to Brennan's point, so Get Out made a little less than 80 million in international waters or international theaters, and then it's already made 46 million in all foreign markets already. So yeah, and it's still has to open in Japan, and it's just gonna make a lot of money. I think this is really cool with just the idea of like the success of this movie kind of puts the stamp as Jordan Peele. It's just a brand name. I think this movie sold itself as this is Jordan Peele's next idea, and you're going to see that. You're going to see that from now on. Whatever movie he makes, they're just going to slap his name on it, and people are going to be like, "Ooh, Jordan Peele." And that there is not like any like directors at this point that you can do that with. The only ones that really come to mind are like a Nolan or like a Tarantino. Like even like even Scorsese, like he made Silence a few years ago, which made no money. And it was like a really big flop for Paramount, and there was a lot of troubling things in that production of that movie. But there's not many people who can just sell. There's no directors who can just sell a movie on their name alone. Which this is kind of cool. I like that a lot, and that just kind of it'll make like blockbuster fare or just like movies that get into the zeitgeist just a little different, and not as much as I love at the MCU and Marvel and DC and all that. Like, it is fun when one of these movies comes around and really becomes a big deal. So, good job on us.
Yeah, and I'm excited to see, because I mean, normally when you have someone that's kind of emerging as a director and a screenwriter, you have everything comes in threes. And so I'd imagine his next movie, whatever it is going to be kind of along a similar vein of Us and Get Out. But I'm excited to see when he really takes that momentum and starts applying it into different genres or whatever his real passion projects are beyond doing the horror stuff he's doing right now.
Yeah, and he's really big on producing, and he has his production house Monkey Paw Productions, which is actually really fun because the logo for it makes the T noise from Get Out, which I thought was really fun. But he produced BlacKkKlansman last fall, and he's really into that as well. So I think he's gonna also just work on just making other projects for other people, and so they can sell on his name as well. So the success of him is going to have a much broader scope than I think even we can comprehend, which is really cool to see.
Yeah, I think the touch that he added to BlacKkKlansman was so crucial because I think he really modernized kind of just a ton of the film in general. I mean, Spike Lee he's an older guy. I mean, this isn't his generation of filmmaking anymore. We've kind of passed that. So it was great to see him put out a film like BlacKkKlansman that was just that good, and it did so well and got so much praise. But Jordan Peele's touch on that film is noticeable. He really made it. He really helped out, I think, from a creative standpoint, just maybe from a comedic aspect as well. Kind of making the film something that you're touching on a lot of dark themes, but you can still have a good time with the movie.
Yeah, that's something we've seen, and I mean, it's hard to tell what kind of creative control that producers have on films. I mean, it varies from project to project. But this was one of the funnier, as to your point, it was one of the funnier Spike Lee movies in quite some time. So, and Jordan Peele really likes to add in comedy to his movies, and I thought Us will probably be one of the funnier movies I've seen all year when this year's all said and done. Because it's just I just really like his influence, and it's just gonna make things a little more interesting. So,
yeah, I mean, as far as the power of a producer goes, I always think to The Nightmare Before Christmas, which is not a Tim Burton movie, but is produced by Tim Burton, and so everyone associates it with Tim Burton.
There
Like
you
his
go.
name's on the poster. It's and so I think Jordan Peele's kind of moving into that territory where like you see this certain style of movie that he's got his production company behind. His name's on the front. Like these aren't his movies, but they're his movies.
Yeah, that is kind of cool to see. It's just that we're witnessing the rise of a new power in Hollywood. I mean, sounds really big and just just amazing when I say that, but like it's kind of true. Like
It
people,
is.
he's already involved in a bunch of stuff, and CBS throwing a ton of money at him for Twilight Zone. Like he's here to stay for a while, which is really fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm glad because I believe his last major film before Get Out was Keanu, which I thought was hilarious. It was
That's a funny
Key
movie.
Ampiel on that one, and
Really funny movie.
it just didn't do so well at the box office. And so I'm glad to see that that really didn't define his career at all.
Yeah, I think that was like the closing like of like a chapter or like a book, and it's like, all right, like this is our last hurrah as Key and Peele, and now we're gonna go and like do our own things, and both of them are successful in their own different ways. So it's cool to see.
Yeah, I would definitely agree on that. So moving on to Captain Marvel, unless you guys have anything else to add, which is in the number third spot this week.
Yeah,
Yeah, Captain Marvel is yeah. Go ahead, Brennan.
yeah, no worries. A 40% drop. That's pretty good. 20 million, 20.5 million. I mean, the film is approaching $1 billion. It should be there any moment now. I think probably within the next day or two, we might see this thing surpass $1 billion. So yeah, there you go. That's another big hit for Marvel. We've been talking about this a lot the last few weeks. I'm curious though, still curious to see what the bump will be when Endgame rolls around. So that'll be neat to see.
Yeah, I mean, we've kind of talked this one to death over the past few weeks.
Yeah, there's just a few fun little I guess milestones that it hit. It passed the first Guardians of the Galaxy and Spider-Man: Homecoming at the domestic box office with its run this week, and it's also probably going to, if I see my stats here, it's probably nestling in right where it's going to end up in terms of worldwide gross for the Marvel movies. It's right at, as you said, right below $1 billion, and it's seventh all time for the MCU. And at sixth is Captain America: Civil War, which had 1.1 billion, about 1.1, 1.2. So that would take a serious amount for Captain Marvel to get to that point, and that kind of goes back to what you said, Brennan, about its legs leading into Endgame, where we could see it get a little closer than we would have expected based on that number to Civil War. But I think this movie's just doing really good. There's really, at this point, there's just really nothing incredibly new. It's just like all these milestones that Disney can be like, hey, look how great we are, look how much money we have. So
Yep.
yeah, Captain Marvel doing really well, and I have nothing else to add.
And then, in terms of dollar amounts, it's quite a big step down from Captain Marvel to 5 Feet Apart. Captain Marvel is
Yes,
in
sir.
at 20.5 million, and 5 Feet Apart's in at 6.25. We've talked about this movie before. I really don't know how much there was to say about it at the beginning. I'm not sure if there's much else to say about it now.
The one thing
Um,
is that it passed 50 million worldwide
Yeah.
this week.
Yeah.
So that's really it. It's making a tidy little sum of money.
Yeah, and you're right when you pointed out when it first got released, that kind of genre is underserved. People who like those types of films, they're kind of underserved. This film has great legs. A 26.9% drop this weekend. The film is just kind of crawling along, and it's making its money. So you were 100% right, Nick, when you originally guessed that it would have the legs, just because the audience here is underserved, and it's making its money. So
Yeah, and I mean, I wasn't able to talk about this last week because I wasn't on the pod, but I went and saw it, and it was a full theater, and I was the only man in the entire theater. It was me and a bunch of 13-year-old girls crying their eyes out, and I could not have felt more out of place. But it really just shows, like, when you make movies for people that just want to see their type of movie, like that's why The Kissing Booth was so big. I've mentioned this before. Like, The Kissing Booth was one of the biggest Netflix movies last year, which is just crazy. When you consider they put out like Battle of Buster Scruggs and Roma, and it's like no, like 13, like teenagers, like tweens, like they can really do a lot for your bottom line if you kind of cater to them. And that's exactly what this movie was. I mean, you have Cole Sprouse in there, who just like every kid loves from Sweet Life back in the day, and it's doing well. Lionsgate is a smart job by them. It's just making its money, and it's probably gonna do well whenever it hits streaming. It'll have like second legs, and people will find it again, and it'll become a big deal, maybe. So it's just one of those movies. It comes around, just it's gonna make its money, and we won't think about it, but its audience will a lot.
Yeah, I mean, I can't wait till the 5 Feet Apart cinematic universe really rolls out.
That's 6 feet apart. I guess it would be four.
Start.
Considering the movie, it would be 4 feet apart, or actually, it could be 6. Either way, I don't want to spoil it for any tweens who haven't seen it and love our podcast. Uh, but I was shocked when I saw this movie. There is room for a sequel. There's possibilities. It doesn't quite end how you would expect it to, even if I still hated it. But yeah, there's possibilities here. So if Netflix wants to buy this from Lionsgate and then just make like 10 movies out of it, it'll probably all be incredibly popular, and we'll all be groaning ridiculously when they become popular. But yeah, it's a thing. I don't think I quite understand it. I don't think you guys quite understand it either. But people love it.
Yeah. So moving on. Unplanned debuted this week at number 5 with 6.1 million. This is another Pure Flix film, so well, those numbers wouldn't be strong for a blockbuster debut, but for a Pure Flix debut, it's actually pretty high. I think this is one of their highest so far.
Yeah, there's a whole interesting little subplot to this that grew over the weekend where the Unplanned Twitter account was suspended by Twitter. Twitter has come out and mentioned that it was like their anti, like, I forget what it's exactly called, like their anti, like, hate, like, speech type of, like, their bots that work with that, or like that deal with just like monitoring, like just like unsavory discussions on Twitter. It was something where they saw it was following another account, or engaged with another account that had these issues in the past with Twitter, so they just immediately just banned it. And what that actually did was just a bunch of people came to the movie's defense, and people really bum rushed Twitter support, and eventually it was only banned for like 20 hours, something like that, and then it immediately went back up, and then the account actually gained like a decent amount more followers. And I wonder, it's just like this news cycle around it. I wonder if that pushed the movie's opening box office at all, because like you said, that's 6 million for this movie. It only was in over 1,000 screens, so that's like a decent chunk of change. And I mean, Easter's coming up in a few weeks, so I imagine this movie will have decent legs wherever it's played. So this is a curious little movie, and it's an interesting little test case for extra study, I think.
Yeah, I think you're 100% right when you said the controversy probably helped drive how much money it made. It was not only fifth at the box office this weekend, but it was also fifth in terms of theater average. So it was only out in a little over 1,000 theaters, but it did well in those theaters. It had pretty good Thursday preview numbers at $700,000. That to me was pretty good, considering Dumbo was just at 2.6 million. So I mean, the stretch it was there. This movie, I didn't really know too much about it. It kind of came out of nowhere. But yeah, that's pretty interesting stuff you bring up. It was projected to only make about 3 million this weekend, and it made 6.1. So yeah, it seems like the controversy probably helped it out.
And this is one of those. It's good to monitor this for later podcasts coming in a few weeks, because as I mentioned, with Easter coming up, we are going to see some faith-based movies start to come out honestly every weekend. And they, like you said, you probably won't hear about a lot of them, because they really just market to their audience and that's it. Um, like, oh, I think it was either last year or the year before that was I Can Only Imagine, which became like a massive success, and it was based off of that country song that of the same name, and it made like $100 million. It was a crazy hit for whatever studio put that out. It might have been Pure Flix, but we're gonna see this like with I think Breakthrough is
Yep.
coming out in a few weeks,
Yeah.
which that trailer makes me laugh every time. If you've seen it, you kind of know what I'm
Yeah.
referring to. But it's like all these movies like make a decent amount of money because they know exactly how to market them, and they're only going to put it in areas that where their audience is, and they're not going to do anything more than that. So it is really interesting. It's really shows how advanced marketing has been and distribution. It's really interesting.
Yeah, and I'm not sure how strong the legs for Unplanned will be because of Breakthrough. You mentioned that, just because they
Yeah.
have actually marketed that one pretty aggressively, and it's got a pretty decent cast as well. Like that's probably what surprised me the most because the lead character is Chrissy Metz from This Is Us.
Hmm.
Topher Grace is in it, and Mike Coulter, Luke Cage is in it. And so it's also, if I remember correctly, Breakthrough is the first 20th Century Fox film to be distributed by Disney following the merger.
Hmm.
Oh, that is so
Um,
weird.
so that, yeah, that'll be an interesting thing to watch. But yeah, I honestly don't know if Unplanned will have as strong of legs because Breakthrough seems to be like the next one that they're kind of banking on to be a big hit. Steph Curry is an executive producer on Breakthrough as well,
Oh
so
wow.
it's poised to probably do fairly well.
I've been
That's
seeing it
interesting.
like all the time. Like I've in the last couple months, heading to the theaters, I see this trailer play pretty frequently. So I think yeah, for sure, it'll probably do pretty well. It's coming out, I believe, on the Wednesday before Easter weekend. So yeah, I'm sure this thing will do good.
And there's also I totally forgot about this movie because it's gone through a lot of issues. But there's a Mary Magdalene movie coming out in 2 weeks with Rooney Mara and Joaquin Phoenix. This, I'm not joking. This is a movie, and and what's his name is in it? What's his 12 Years a Slave? What's his
Uh,
name?
I
The
don't know how to
the main
pronounce it.
main guy.
Yeah, him.
I don't want to
I,
botch his name either. I'm a huge
I
fan of him, but
always,
It's
I love him too. And I always look up his pronunciation, and I can just never say it, so I just get nervous and just never say it.
yeah,
But he's in
I
it, and and this movie. I think this was originally supposed to. I think this movie is like kind of old. It was like made in 2016, and it was supposed to be a Weinstein release. And so yeah, that's not going to happen. So yeah, that movie's coming out too. It's all these movies just pop up out of nowhere, and I mean that's a massive deal. It's fucking Phoenix and Rooney Mara. It's like two of our best working actors. It's just crazy how many like faith-based movies come around this time of year.
yeah, it's that'll be an interesting one. I did not know that existed. Um, but Joaquin Phoenix as Jesus will be an interesting choice.
I'm curious to what you want to say about the beach bum though. So kind of want to hear about that.
Oh, Beach Bum. I really want to talk about this. So I had one choice of movie this week. I had some thing. I just doing life, it happens. And I was like, I could see Dumbo, or I could just see the next weird Harmony Korine movie, uh, which I chose that. And for those of you that don't know about Harmony Korine, he likes to make kind of gross movies that are just really inaccessible to basically everybody. He made a movie a while back called Trash Humpers, and it is exactly what it sounds like. It is literally that. So he made this movie called The Beach Bum with Matthew McConaughey and Zac Efron, Jonah Hill, Snoop Dogg, Jimmy Buffett, uh, Isla Fisher, and it's Martin Lawrence is in it too. And it's literally about Matthew McConaughey, who is the titular beach bum. He's just the ultimate washout at any like coastal town. Just loves his PBR, his gross long hair, and like tropical wear. And he just loves the beach. He loves just living life and smoking so much, just all the time, and drinking all the time. And he just loves living life. And it's literally just about him, just going around and kind of his misadventures for an hour and a half. And there are some amazing cameos. Zac Efron like he's in it for about 5 minutes, and it's one of the funniest things I've ever seen in my life. Or he I don't want to ruin it, but he's insane. And Jonah Hill talks like an old Southern prospector, and Snoop Dogg is doing Snoop Dogg things, and Jimmy Buffett's there playing music, playing his yacht rock. So I saw this movie. It's interesting. This movie actually got a pretty wide release, which I was kind of shocked about. It had over 1,000 screens, and while this is probably Harmony Korine's most successful movie he's ever made, just in terms of a random person could watch this movie and like it. It still is not for everybody. I came out of this movie loving it, and I saw it with my girlfriend, who was just like not about it at all. So sorry to her that I drug her through that experience. But I would like people to check this movie out just because it is so weird, and it's literally it's ostensibly it's about nothing. He just kind of goes around, does his own thing. That's kind of the point of the entire movie. So it's just a lot of vignettes of him just being incredibly drunk and high at all times. And I thought it was hilarious. And I would like to see how this movie performs, because even in my own theater, there were some people who thought it was just like the funniest thing, and other people were just pissed off. I'm like, I fucking hate that movie, and it's not an hour and a half I won't get back.
Yeah.
So I'm really interested to see how this movie performs. It's a small movie, $5 million, so 1.8 this week is pretty decent for it. So
Yeah.
that's a lot of beach bum talk. But I really love this movie. It made me laugh.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens with it. I know it's rated R. Is it pretty hard R? Like, is it?
It's very hard R. There's just things happening all over the place.
Okay.
It's not gross. I don't know. I wouldn't describe it. I thought it was like kind of innocently R. It's just a lot of just people just smoking and drinking weed or drinking alcohol. It's just people just doing all the drugs they possibly can, and just the debauchery that ensues. So
Will there be a 4-year consideration campaign for Matthew McConaughey for Best Actor this year?
Oh, I hope so. This is.
I just bring that up. I just bring that up because for his last film that this director made, Spring Breakers, there was a kind of a small cult 4-year consideration campaign for James Franco for Best Supporting Actor. So I just want to bring that up.
I think the tagline for that was because there's that big line in that movie where James Franco was like, "Look at all my shit," and he's just like, he has like all this like semi-assault like rifles and stuff. And so I think the tagline for that was like, "Consider this shit," and it's like, oh, that's really funny. But this is the persona, like, so we've kind of seen like Matthew McConaughey do like the light version of this for like ever, but like this was like, I'm fully convinced this was the persona that he's been building to for like ever, because it is so Matthew McConaughey. It's like Matthew McConaughey turned up to 1,000, and it's hilarious, and it made me so happy. I would, to anyone like listening to this podcast, just give it a shot. Like, even if it's in theaters or anything, I would like to see this movie do well, because I just want Harmony Korine to do more weird things. But this movie is just, oh my gosh, it's just, I want to talk about Zac Efron in this movie so badly, but it is.
First Serenity, now The Beach Bum. Matthew McConaughey.
Interesting year for Matthew McConaughey. But this movie is so wild, and I just want everyone just maybe to give it a shot, because it might be for you. It's really funny, and there's some really like broad slapsticky things in it. It's bizarre. I love this movie. I wonder, because it's not getting great reviews, so I wonder if I'm the only one that says that. But so maybe don't listen to me. I don't know. Either way, this has been your Beach Bum Talk with Nick Kush, and I'm happy to have brought it to you.
Yeah.
So
there isn't a whole lot else. notable going off in the box office, unless you guys have anything. Um, One thing I thought was interesting this week is Jai Courtney revealed that he's actually in the Suicide Squad quasi reboot with James Gunn,
Cool.
which I normally don't like Jai Courtney and most of the things he's done, just because he gets really typecast in these just terribly stereotypical characters. But he was one of the few things I really enjoyed about Suicide Squad, so I'm glad to see him coming back as they're kind of cutting everybody else out of the movie.
That's kind of fun. I like that too. I think it was one of those things where he kind of had the Taylor Kitsch syndrome, where they were just Hollywood was just trying to make him a thing.
Yeah.
And we were like, stop making Jai Courtney a thing. He's never going to be a thing. And then, like with that role, he just kind of like let it all loose, and he just kind of was just like the weird character actor that I think he always should have been. And so yeah, I'm happy that he's in there. He was fun. He was fun drinking his tall boys and with his boomerang, and I loved it. Good for
He's a
him.
unicorn.
Yeah, exactly. He's just weird. I like my weird in my big budget movies.
So yeah, I think that was all I had. Unless there's anything else, that pretty much wraps it up for this week's episode.
Yeah, there's one little thing with Diane. It was this small little movie directed by Kent Jones. I just wanted to mention it really quick, just because it was just a cool little thing that he was a longtime critic and film preservationist, and he went out and made his own movie that IFC distributed. I didn't make much money. That's kind of how IFC rolls it. They just kind of put it in a few theaters, and then it goes on streaming right away. But it was critically lauded, so that's kind of cool. As us who are critics and just love film, it's kind of cool to see one of us actually go out and make a movie. Mm-hmm. But yeah, other than that, that's kind of all I had. Besides the Beach Bum, which is the greatest thing ever. I might just have to talk about it in every podcast from now on. Other than that, there wasn't really much going on outside of the top 5 from my perspective.
Yeah, I agree, 100%.
Yeah, I would agree. Next week we'll get a little bit more interesting because we've got Shazam rolling out as long with Pet Sematary, and then it's pretty much superhero and Disney movies every week from here till the end of time.
Yep.
Yeah, next weekend's gonna be fun. I'm very excited for next weekend. I think that it's gonna be fun to see how these movies perform. I mean, Shazam's getting rave reviews. Pet Sematary's getting pretty good reviews as well out of South by Southwest Film Festival. I think that both films are gonna do well, respectively. So I'm pretty excited for next weekend.
Yeah, should be fun.
Yeah. Thanks for listening to this episode of the MovieBabble podcast. Again, you can check us out online at MovieBabbleReviews.com and join us next week as we break down the release of Shazam and Pet Sematary.